Aloha, and how's it? Today we're talking all about how to get more eyeballs on your featured section so that you can grow your business and scale your impact as an expert on LinkedIn. So, more on that in a minute. How was your weekend? I always ask. We spent a good amount of time at the ocean watching the sunset and surfing. And normally we don't do this. Normally we spend the time at the ocean more like in the middle of the day. So it was actually pretty nice to do some sunset surfs. Completely different experience. It was kind of weird watching like the moon rise as we were out there. It was just gorgeous. So I will post some footage because my husband likes to drone. So I will share some of that footage on my Instagram if you're curious and you like sunsets. Mindi R. Rossler. So there's two R's in there. So it's official. I'm officially addicted to the sunset surf slot. And it's actually a lot less crowded in our lineups. So if you're familiar with surfing, sometimes there's a lot of people out there, so trying to catch waves can be challenging. All right, so enough surf talk. Now it is time for Mondays with Mindy. This is a weekly show on Monday afternoons if you're based in the US, where I talk about all things LinkedIn pipeline, promo, and profiles, what I like to call the three P's of LinkedIn. And a little teaser for those of you who love podcasts. My podcast, The Mango Effect, is launching in just 2 weeks. I can't believe it. 2 weeks from today on April 4th. So the trailer episode is up now at mangoeffect.com. If you want to check it out, also on Apple Podcast, go ahead and subscribe so you'll know when the episodes drop. On the podcast, I will actually be talking about different topics. So, not a lot of LinkedIn stuff. It's more of a passion project for me. So, we talk about creating our lifestyles by design, along with some pretty juicy topics that relate to entrepreneurship, health and well being, surfing, relationships, building a business or career with intention, all of the above. And I actually just booked my first guest for the show. So there will be some episodes that are not solo episodes of me just talking. So check it out on Instagram at Mango Effect Podcast if you want to see more. All right. So, do you have questions about LinkedIn that you want me to answer? Be sure to like this post, comment below, whether you're live or watching from the replay. Leave your questions there because I will answer them after the show or on a future episode of Mondays with Mindy. This is where a lot of the topics come from is tell me what you want to know and we'll talk about it on LinkedIn. So, leave your questions below. I invite you to do so. Let's get to today's topic. What's the big deal with your featured section on LinkedIn? So, last week we talked about how you can attract the right people to your profile and start getting more opportunities with your headlines. So, if you are curious about LinkedIn profile headlines, check out last week because that one was really about the formula to nail your headline. So, today that leads us to okay, now that I've worked on my headline, what do I do? There's this thing called a featured section. What do I do with my featured section? So that's what we're talking about today. And we're talking about it from the point of view of you as an expert. So if you're an expert and you're trying to refresh your LinkedIn profile and you're trying to figure out what should I put in my featured, that's what we're talking about today. So your LinkedIn featured section is something you should really be paying attention to and taking advantage of as an expert, especially if your aim is to build trust and credibility for the long haul. Too many experts either don't know how to use this section or they're kind of struggling with what to put here. So, if that's you, you're in the right place because that's what we're talking about today. About 5 or more years ago, your personal website used to be like the linchpin of your business as an expert. If you didn't have a website, people did not want to do business with you. So, I think it is really, really interesting to see how people have shifted in the way that they approach doing business. Now, people actually come to your LinkedIn profile, and if it looks good, if your featured section looks fantastic, a lot of them don't even do additional research. They don't actually go and look at your website anymore. People will want to do business with you right then and there. So the key is to really make sure that your featured section looks good. If people don't want to go digging around and trying to figure out where else you are online, if they come to LinkedIn and that's kind of your hub, that's going to be really helpful in starting that relationship. So you want to make sure it looks pretty darn good if you want people to purchase from you, especially if you fall into the creative freelancer segment, if you are accustomed to having a professional portfolio, if you're an online digital course creator, if you are seen as an influencer, a thought leader, all of these types of experts really need to pay attention to their featured section. So, over the past few years, there's actually been a bit of a shift away from personal websites. You may have noticed, I have noticed for sure, even in the way that I do business with other people. Though I still have my own website and I do try to drive traffic there, it's really not the only place that matters. So, just because you don't own the traffic, going to your LinkedIn profile does not mean that it's not valuable. So, I'd almost argue that traffic on LinkedIn, people that are coming to your profile, I see that traffic as almost even more valuable to my business and my brand more than cold traffic that is coming to my website from search engines. Especially if you are an expert like me, people are looking for you, like you as an individual, and not just the index search engine terms in your content. So think about it. When was the last time you hired an expert based on a cold website search? Like, that was the first time, literally, you typed in something into Google, somebody's name popped up, you went and checked out their website, and then you actually purchased from them. Most of the time, that's not how it works, especially these days. You likely hear about someone via word of mouth. Maybe you see an ad at some point, you hear that person on a podcast, probably a combination of all of these things, or somebody just plain introduces you to this individual. So, no longer should experts be so focused on things like keyword optimization and search engines or whittling away precious hours fine tuning your websites for cold traffic. It's just not as effective. There is a better use of your time. As an expert, you need to be out there. You need to be talking with people. You don't want to be sitting there like, okay, do I have the right keywords? I'm going to work on my SEO for a few hours. That's kind of like so 5, 10 years ago. So that time would be much better spent on a simple refresh of your featured section on your profile. Literally, it will take you less than 2 to 5 minutes every time you update. Maybe even less if you're just adding a thing here or there. That may take you 60 seconds. So the key is knowing what to put here and when to update this section to ensure it's getting more of the right eyeballs. Well, not literally, and we don't real literal eyeballs. So apologies to my non-US friends for this turn of phrase. All right, so aloha. For those who don't know me, my name is Mindy Rosser. I'm the founder of Mindy Rosser Marketing, and I have a group program called the LinkedIn Accelerator for those who want to go from 0 to 60 on LinkedIn with their profile and their network. The next cohort, super excited, is opening for enrollment in early April. So get on the wait list if you want to be the first notified. I will share the link at the end of this live stream if you are curious. So I help professionals who feel they are the best kept secret in their industry to become that go-to visible expert in their niche so they can get that next opportunity, grow their business, and scale their impact on LinkedIn. And in this live, we are going to talk about why an outdated or missing featured section is causing you to miss those perfect fit opportunities on LinkedIn, and how you can actually refresh your featured section with the best types of content for your market so that you can get more clients and business opportunities. That's what we all want, right? So, are you ready? Let's do this and jump right in. Reminder to go ahead and like this post, whether you're live or watching from the replay, to give it some social love. All right, so too many experts discover the featured section and they immediately rush to fill it up with content. So they're like, oh, there's a featured section. Oh, what can I add here? So this is not necessarily a bad thing, but they often don't know what is going to be the most valuable in this section. So what happens is it turns into this hodgepodge of content. And they're like, oh, I should probably throw this in there and that in there. Oh, I have this PDF. Maybe I should upload that. They don't think of it as a unit, as a whole. So what happens is they tend to leave the same piece of content up for years without refreshing or playing with the order. Maybe they have shifted their direction and maybe that piece of content is no longer relevant. So thankfully, LinkedIn recently got rid of the timestamp. There used to be a timestamp on the featured section items. So when you would upload it, it would kind of timestamp it and say 1 week ago or 1 year ago or 6 years ago. So thankfully, they don't do that anymore. So this actually is helpful if you have content that you added to the featured section a long time ago. It will not look old. As long as it's evergreen and a timeless piece of content, you can still leave it there. So you don't have to worry about the time-stamped pieces of content, but you do need to pay attention to the mix of content that you highlight in your featured section. Just uploading content that looks all the same is not ideal. So if you have a blog and you upload a bunch of blog articles and it all looks the same all the way across, it's like, it's kind of boring. So you don't want it to look that way. You want it to feel very vibrant. You want to be intentional about refreshing your featured content at least every couple of months. if not every week or two. For those of you who do LinkedIn live streams like what you're watching here, I do these, so I update my featured section a lot. Or if you have a LinkedIn newsletter, you're going to want to pay a lot more attention to updating this section more frequently. Neglecting to update the featured section frequently enough will subconsciously communicate to your profile viewers that you don't pay attention to the details, that you don't really care about your personal brand. That's kind of an afterthought, that maybe you're on LinkedIn, maybe you're not. Sometimes you're here, sometimes you're not. Your personal brand matters a lot, especially if you're doing anything on LinkedIn. If you are using LinkedIn or trying to get back into using LinkedIn or trying to figure out how to get started on LinkedIn, you need to pay attention to how people perceive you and your personal brand. And that starts with your LinkedIn profile and your featured section. So even if you're a subject matter expert for a company and maybe you're like, Mindy, I'm not trying to get leads, I'm not a consultant, you still need to pay attention to your personal profile and your featured section. As a subject matter expert for a company, your face may not be like the face of the brand, but what people tend to do is they actually look up the experts at a company. If you are cited, if you are quoted anywhere, they're going to look you up on LinkedIn. So be thoughtful and be aware that people do their homework and will look you up. We like to connect with humans. We're humans. So we don't connect with companies and brands as much as we connect with actual people. So you may be surprised how many people actually are searching for you and trying to find you. And what are they going to see? What are they going to find when they land on your profile? Is your profile going to leave them feeling less confident in working with your company or directly with you? Think about that for a moment. You want to treat your featured section as, I like to say, it's like the above the fold section on your website or landing page. So if any of you have websites, landing pages, you know what I mean when I say above the fold. Basically, when people are first landing on a page, they're looking above the fold, and a lot of times they don't scroll down. So technically, your featured section is not above the fold when people come to your profile, but you want to treat it as if it is, because people do tend to scroll on LinkedIn. If they like your headline, they're going to scroll and see your featured section. So that's why we talked about the headline last week. And now it's like, okay, let's talk about that featured section. So when you are featuring your content, you want to pay attention to this section as if it was above the fold. And that's going to help you shift your perspective on what to put here. So when we treat it as, okay, this is going to be one of the first things people see after my headline, they're going to see my featured section. What actually needs to go here? How are they experiencing me? For a lot of people, your profile, your LinkedIn profile is one of the very first experiences they have with you. So when someone lands on your profile for the first time, they should know instantly who you are, what you do, how you help people, and what you actually deliver. So, those four things really need to come across on your profile. If any of these elements are unclear, you risk losing them right then and there. And I don't know about you, but I love seeing powerful images and content in the featured section. I love it when somebody delights me, when I land on their profile and I'm like, oh, they have a podcast, they have a newsletter, they've written some articles, they like to post content on LinkedIn, and I already start feeling something inside and feel that that relationship is starting, even though I've never interacted with the person. So you can do that, and it's not that hard to do. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So, as an expert in your field, there is something very specific that you do. You may have a ton of competitors, maybe not, but you have a very different way of approaching the same problem. This is the type of content you want to feature because it immediately helps people, first of all, categorize you as the expert that you are. And then it also sets you apart from your competitors so you don't look like them. And they say, huh, I had not looked at that problem from that perspective before. So if you look like just everyone else out there or put really dry and boring stuff in your featured section just to fill it up with something, you're not going to generate the new opportunities you are hoping for on LinkedIn. The feature section needs to be put together with your primary LinkedIn audience in mind. If you followed me for any length of time, you've probably heard me talk about LinkedIn audiences, and you need to focus on one primary audience. When you have too many audiences, it can be very confusing for people. So even if they don't fit that primary audience, they're going to say, oh, well, maybe she does focus on working with B2B marketing experts or B2B marketing companies, but you probably also work with individuals, so you are still not excluding them, but you need to be very specific about your primary LinkedIn audience. And that means you need to think through which content your primary audience needs to see in your featured section to begin that know, like, and trust process we're all pretty familiar with. So don't just grab any old piece of content and plop it here because it will look less than intentional. Experts are intentional. I'll say that again. Experts are intentional. So match your personal brand or company vibe to the content that you choose for your featured section. You really want to keep it professional on LinkedIn, but also kind of teasing. I call it teasing a bit more of your personality here. You don't want it to feel like really, really stuffy. You want people to be able to just glance at it, maybe scroll through, maybe not, and just get a sense of who you are as a human, kind of your personality. And that's what you really want to showcase in this section. You want to showcase your zones of genius. Can people instantly just visually see what's in your featured section and say, oh, okay, she's this type of person or he's that type of person? All right, so let's break it down. If you haven't sat down to think deeply about your featured section, do that while we are talking today. Maybe make some notes. It's high time that you do so as an expert. Too many experts, like I said, just start adding a lot of content and ideas that seem to be kind of like all over the place for their audience. And there's not a common thread that ties them all together. So you're like, wait, Mindy, are you telling me I actually have to think about how my content comes across as a whole in the featured section? Yes, I am. I am. So, viewing your featured content as its own body of work will help you understand what should go there. I like to say it's more of a concise version of your professional portfolio. It's kind of like this living being. It's a mix of content. It's also like some of the work that you've done, some of the programs that you have. Possibly you're trying to build your email list and maybe have a freebie. So it is a range of things. It's giving people a taste of your work. As an expert, your job is to make whatever your area of expertise is as simple, understandable, and streamlined as possible. That means people should be able to just quickly glance at your LinkedIn featured section without wondering what type of expert you are, what problems you solve, who your target market is, and how you can help them. You're like, Mindy, that's a big ask. Yes, but it's really not as hard as you think. So if there's anything unclear in this section or if it feels kind of random, remember you're going to make people think too hard about categorizing you. And in that moment, you're going to lose them. It's got to be crystal clear, even when you think, oh, well, I want to include this and that. Oh, this was kind of a cool project I did like 10, 20 years ago. You don't want to focus on that. You want to focus on what you're doing now, the problems you're solving now, the people you're helping now, the primary audience you are serving now. As an expert on LinkedIn, you represent the one thing, like one thing. And I know that's hard for me to say too, because I am very multi passionate. I have a lot of things that I like to do. You want to represent the one thing you want to be known for until you develop a ton of expertise in that one thing and you don't add a bunch of other seemingly unrelated themes to your featured section. Okay. So you're really focusing on the one theme, and there's probably a lot of different content themes that represent that one thing you're known for, and that's fine. Okay. So let's talk about the 5 types of content you can add to your LinkedIn featured section. I'm actually going to share my screen because some of you are like, what's the featured section? Where is it? What are you talking about here? So let me share the screen, and you should be able to see me next to the featured section. Okay, awesome. All right, so in the feature section, the first one we're going to talk about is add a post. So when you click here, it says add a post. This is the easiest way to get started with building your featured section if you have been posting content on LinkedIn in the news feed. So if you look on your homepage and that's where you're posting content, that is the news feed. This is the easiest way to just take that content and add it to your featured section. So you can feature a post that was insightful or seemed to resonate with your audience. I tend to recommend choosing posts that perform well or are an accurate reflection of your work and what you do. So if you notice a post take off, is what I say on LinkedIn, that is likely a good one to choose because profile viewers will see the number of engagements on that post. And it's like this instant credibility booster if there's some engagement on the post, even if it's like a half dozen reactions or so. It doesn't need to be dozens or hundreds of reactions to be a good fit. Remember, don't build an entire featured section with posts, as you really want to include other types of content in your featured section. But this is a quick start way to get things going and also show that you are active on LinkedIn. So that's the first one, is the add a post. All right. So number 2 is add a newsletter. So you see where it says add a newsletter here. Now, looking at my featured section, it is the one in the middle. So, where it says newsletter, this is not your newsletter, that is your email list. Let me be clear. This is a newsletter that you have started on LinkedIn. So, this is a LinkedIn newsletter. So, unless you have LinkedIn creator mode turned on, you will know if you have it turned on if you look under resources and it says creator mode and it will have this green thing next to it turned on. If you want to know if you have access to newsletters, that's where you can see that. Okay. But basically, adding a newsletter is when you have creator mode turned on, you will see that you can post your newsletter and add it to this section. This is a brand new feature. They have recently added, like being able to feature the actual newsletter itself. And what's really nice is you can see how many subscribers it has. You can see what it's about. You can see the logo. You can see the name of the newsletter, how often it publishes, and you can see if you're subscribed or not. So if somebody comes to your profile and wants to subscribe to your newsletter, they can do that right here. So if you have a newsletter, highlight the newsletter itself. This is fantastic and it makes it super easy to subscribe and also establishes you as an expert. Even if someone doesn't subscribe to your newsletter, but they see that it's here, there's something subconscious that goes in their mind like, huh, they have a newsletter, they've got that many subscribers, huh? Maybe they know what they're talking about. So you're playing this game. You're always playing this game as an expert. So consider if you haven't started a newsletter yet, I have actually done some Mondays with Mindy's on LinkedIn creator mode. So go back and look at some of those videos and see if you want to turn on creator mode. And then I teach more about making most of newsletters inside my accelerator programs. So if this is top of mind for you, stay tuned. Okay. I will share a link at the end of this live stream where you can get on the wait list for those programs. Now, remember, if you have a newsletter and you're trying to build the number of subscribers, be sure to feature it in one of the first few spots. You can see I have mine in you can see 3 spots on desktop. I have it in the second spot. That's intentional. That is on purpose. You want to get more traction with your newsletter, especially if you are getting good traffic to your LinkedIn profile. Okay, so moving on into the next one here, we are going to talk about adding an article. So, adding an article is when you click here, it says add an article. This is not an article from your blog. Let me be clear again. This is long form content that you are publishing to LinkedIn as an article or as a newsletter edition. So if you have the newsletter feature turned on, this is an edition. So it's an article. So it's not to be confused with subscribing to the newsletter. This is actually featuring an individual piece of content that you have written. So you do not need to have creator mode turned on to use this feature. As long as you have published long form articles to LinkedIn, you can feature that content here. And just about every expert should be creating some type of long form content on the regular. You might have heard me say that before. And even if it's a podcast or it's a video show, you can turn that into an article to share on LinkedIn if you'd like. So, long form content is a high priority on LinkedIn right now. LinkedIn is pushing it. They want people to create long form content. So, please take advantage of these features. I tend to recommend featuring at least one article in your featured section. If you have some of these, so make sure to add them. And if you want to see what it looks like, scrolling across this one that says social media, how much time do you think you should be spending on in social media right there? That is an article. So that's what it looks like. Okay. All right, so moving on to number 4, adding a link. So, what does this mean? When you add a link, if you publish content other than on LinkedIn, so say you are publishing content to YouTube or you have a web page, or maybe you were a speaker at an event, you can add this type of content to your featured section. This is a great way to pull that content into LinkedIn and drive traffic to other places for people to go visit and to learn more if you want them to consume that entire piece of content elsewhere. Keep in mind that if you do use this, most people are not going to all click through. So if you're trying to use this as a traffic source, it's not going to be the best fit. You really want to focus on building credibility. Then, like, okay, I'm driving a ton of traffic from my featured section to this page. Probably not so much. So keep that in mind with the content that you link to. If the content, one other thing on this, if you add a link and the content does not look good when you're posting it, it is because the image that is associated with the page at the source. So if you are trying to post, for example, in a lead magnet, and there is an image associated with that page, you need to make sure that image looks good, because if that image doesn't look quite right, it's going to link and look a little funny, or it's not going to show the right image. So you might have to resize the image at the source. That is a common problem. A lot of people experience it. And if that doesn't work, if you're like Mindy, it still looks really terrible, You have another option. It is called Add Media. So when you click Add Media, you see that it brought up a screen where I can actually add media to my section. So you can upload media directly to LinkedIn. This can be anything from a white paper to an ebook to a PDF or a podcast audiogram for those of my podcast friends out there. Keep in mind that when you upload content, you are not automatically hyperlinking it to the original source. So if you are grabbing a file from your computer and uploading it, it is not going to link, obviously, to the website. So, one workaround is to actually put the link in the description section for that piece of content. So, if you want them to say, here's a PDF, read this little mini ebook or this white paper, and then go visit my website here for more information. That's one way to do that. So, I tend to upload any content that doesn't look good when I link to it as a PDF or a video or something as a piece of media. It's a good solution if you want to protect the formatting and ensure it looks professional. All right, so we covered a lot. So there you have it. So let's recap the 5 different types of content to add to your featured. Number one, we have adding a LinkedIn post. So if you want to add a post to your section, this is something that you are sharing in the newsfeed that you also want to feature. Number two, you can add a LinkedIn newsletter. If you have not created a newsletter and you are thinking about it, I highly recommend that you do as long as you can be consistent with it. Check out some of my other videos on Mondays with Mindi if you want to learn more about LinkedIn creator mode to learn about newsletters. All right, number three is add an article. So if you have long form content, add an article to this section. Then number four is add a link. So link to other content, link to YouTube videos, link to web pages, link to events where you're speaking, link elsewhere. You can also link to things like your email subscribers. If you're trying to get email subscribers, you can link to that lead magnet page. You can link to a newsletter opt-in form. You can link all kinds of places. All right. And then number five is add media. So if you're thinking, I just want to upload a PDF, some job seekers that I work with will upload their resume. So it really depends on what your target market is looking for and what they expect to see here and what makes the most sense. So those are your 5 options. All right. So what additional questions do you have about optimizing your featured section? If you want to see some really great featured sections, DM me or leave a comment below. I have a number of them. I collect them. When I see a good featured section, I make a note of their profiles. I'm happy to share what these look like in real life. All right, if you are ready to get started with LinkedIn and take the next step to optimize your profile once and for all, so you can start growing that network on the regular and land your next opportunity, join me inside the LinkedIn Accelerator program. We are opening the next cohort in early April. You will want to be a part of it. It is an amazing experience. It's 1 week, so it's not a huge commitment, and we dial in your profile within 5 days together. So if you have questions on that, let me know. Always happy to answer them. And I will see you next week on Mondays with Mindi. Feel free to leave any questions or comments below, and my inbox is open if you want to message me directly. Have a beautiful week. Bye.